You're listening to the Cultured Bumpkin, a literature podcast with Jake Phillips, where we present audiobook quality readings of the classics for your enjoyment. Thank you for stopping by. And remember, just because you're a bumpkin doesn't mean you can't be cultured. Hello and welcome to the Cultured Bumpkin. I'm Jake. On this episode, we're going to read Robert Burns' My Bonny Mary. Now, my very own dear wife is named Mary. Mary Elizabeth. She'll take a swing at me if I just call her Mary. Technically, she goes by the old Southern double name. She thinks plain old Mary is boring. But either way, her name's Mary. So obviously, I think of her when I read this poem. And once upon a time, we weren't married yet, but we were dating, and I had to go to Iraq, right? I'm in the U.S. Army, or I was at the time. And had a deployment to Iraq, and leaving her was very hard. That's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. So this story, or this poem, is very much personal, very close to home, right down to the name of the lady he's talking about. So I love this poem. Before we get into it, remember, if you want to support the Cultured Bumpkin, check the show notes. There's several ways to do it. And that's all I'll say about it, because I don't want this to become a commercial podcast. But if you like the Cultured Bumpkin, want it to stay on the air, or whatever you call a podcast, check out the show notes. There's several ways you can do it, both paid and non-paid. Back to the poem. Here we go. My Bonny Mary by Robert Burns. Go bring me to a pint of wine and fill it in a silver tassie, that I may drink before I go a service to my bonny lassie. The boat rocks at the pier o' Leith, for loud the wind blows frae the ferry. The ship rides by the Berwick Law, and I must leave my Bonny Mary. The trumpet sounds, the banners fly, the glittering spears are ranked ready. The shouts of war are heard afar, the battle closes deep and bloody. It's not the roar of sea or shore what makes me longer wish to tarry, nor shouts of war that's heard afar. It's leaving thee, my Bonny Mary. Isn't that great? It's like a guy going off to war, and he's like, oh, I'm not afraid of all that, war and stuff and killing and bloodshed. I'm going to miss you. That's very sweet. I like that. That's a good poem. That is My Bonny Mary by Robert Burns. And a lot of his stuff is written in dialect, like Scottish dialect. So some of those words, you should look it up and read it for yourself. Some of those I sort of said, I think that's what he meant. If you read it for yourself, you'll see what I'm talking about. And all of his other work too, I think. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Hope you'll subscribe if you haven't. Hope you'll tell a friend. Hope you'll leave a review on whatever platform you listen on. And thank you ever so much for listening. You've been listening to The Cultured Bumpkin, a literature podcast with Jake Phillips. Thank you very much for listening. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed this, would you mind going and subscribing and leaving a nice review on whatever podcast platform you heard this on? I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.